Did you know that you've got a reset button? It's right up here on the very top of your head in the Sahasrara, the thousand-petaled lotus, the upper chakra. It's a little depression that's right in the top of your head. And if you use your finger, it's the same finger that you use when somebody pulls in front of you on the freeway. Use your finger and compress that spot. What it does is it equalizes the pressure between your right and left brain, the analytical side and the creative side of your brain. And sometimes if things are imbalanced, you can sort of feel it rushing from one side to the other in order to balance. The depression of this little button also helps you drain your sinuses. So I always say that although this is the connection between the human and the divine, it also drains the sinuses, so God doesn't really want you to have a stuffy nose. This presentation is about core practices of herbalism, ways that family folks can integrate herbs and foods into their lifestyle in order to stay healthier and live longer. Tibi medicinatibus, the Greek physician Hippocrates stated in 440 BC, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. This advice still rings true to this day and is really at the core of an herbal lifestyle. I'm reminded of a time when I was an apprentice at Herb Farm and I was working in the back garden, and around the side of the house came a really nice looking hippie chick, and so of course I took notice. Then on her somewhat bony hip, and that she did have bony hips, but other parts of her body were not so bony. She had a child of about 2 or 3, and I noticed right away that, you know, my attention shifted to the child, and I could see that the nasal septum was pretty much eaten away. And on closer examination, I saw that there were pustulate lesions on the upper lip, and that's an indication of what an infection called impetigo. We call it these days MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. But back in the day, we just saw it as blood poisoning. And children are really apt to carry this internally, and it can cause pustules to come out in various parts of their body. So the woman was asking me for help in treating the child, and the first thing I asked was, well, does she do well with salads? Oh yeah, Susie loves salads. And so I said, well, here we are in the midst of the garden of medicinal herbs. The very air that passes over these herbs is healing, and the healing herbs are here right underneath our feet. So I showed her first burdock, which we're sitting in front of a burdock plant right now. I showed her the kind of rough, long, petioled leaves of burdock. Thank you, plant. Arctium lapa, right? And this is a great blood cleansing herb that can be used as a fresh root, grated up and put in salads. And then the other ingredient for this kind of spontaneous anti-impetigo formula would be dandelion. And here we have the burdock and the dandelion growing right together. And so the dandelion leaf, thank you, can be differentiated from lookalikes by the deeply lobed and toothed serrate leaf, and by the exudation of white oleogum resin coming out of the of the stem when you cut it, and by the bitterness of it, and by the yellow flower, which is typical to the Asteraceae. So the burdock root breaks up the poison in the blood. The dandelion carries that poison out of the system, so through the urine. So I encouraged Sally to eat the burdock dandelion as a daily salad, morning, noon, and night, really, because it was an acute infection. And the woman came back 3 days later. She was beaming. The baby was beaming, and the nasal septum had returned to normalcy. So make food your medicine, make medicine your food. This is a prime example of same. There's an Ayurvedic proverb: right food, no medicine needed. Wrong food, no medicine can help. So I was in a Chicago eatery in the midst of a blustery, dark, raining, freezing Chicago winter. And I was sitting across from a woman at a table, and she was suffering from a terrible cold. Her nose was all inflamed. She was hypersecreting. She was sneezing and putting tissues down on the table. And I sort of imagined the pile of tissues creeping along the table towards me. And I had a bottle of echinacea in my pocket, and I was considering the possibility of giving her some doses of echinacea, but she had ordered the cheese soup, and as she spooned the cheese soup up out of the bowl, these long strands of cheese were stretching between the spoon and the surface of the soup, and she was putting the soup into these trembling, hypersecreting lips, and then wiping the cheese smears off of her chin. And as I observed all this, I realized the echinacea wasn't going to do any good at all, so I eased the bottle of echinacea back into my pocket. One of my herbal teachers was Ed Smith, who's still around, and a favorite saying of his was, eat the poisons, but also eat the antidotes. And by that, what he meant was, for instance, if you're attracted to eating some roasted meats, then go ahead, eat the roasted meats, but at the same time, eat some raw garlic. So the meat, in essence, would be the quotes unquote poison, because you have a lot of free radicals produced by roasted meats, and the raw garlic, which is anti-cholesterol, and has a tendency to cleanse the blood system and remove free radicals from the blood system and improve cardiovascular health, would be the antidote. And so this is something that has really affected my life. I think about eating in those terms. And before I eat just about anything, I carry with me a raw carrot, and I eat the raw carrot first, and then I eat whatever food it is that's been offered to me. And again, this is sort of like an antidote to the poisons of excess, which are very typical in our society. This is the kinds of poisons of excess or diseases of excess are cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, overweight. If I eat the carrot first, then it gives my body something really good to work on, and then it also satiates me to a certain extent so that I eat less. So a simple carrot is the cure to a lot of the problems that occur from a diet of excess. All right, good. Fast your dogs once a week. Juliet de Berkeley-Levy. I had the good fortune of actually meeting Juliet of the Herbs at one point, and she glowed with the knowledge that came from the old world, from her education with the Romany and her education with living outside in nature, because nature itself is something that teaches us more than any other herbal teacher possibly can. Well, one of the things she always said was fast your dogs once a week. And Annabeth is a really great example, because Annabeth likes to eat a healthy diet. In the morning when she goes out, she actually refuses to eat like a hot dog treat. She's kind of like, what? You're trying to give me hot dogs first thing in the morning? Processed meat? Forget it. I'm going to eat some grass. And she grazes on grass. She loves to eat grass, and she also knows the difference between chickweed and other herbs, which is really an important distinction for all of us. And so she eats a lot of chickweed. She loves chickweed. It's full of saponins that cleanse her little body. Later on in the day, after she has had her morning greens, then she's happy to do her tricks and eat processed meat. But she doesn't necessarily fast herself. And so we don't really follow Juliet's adage of fasting the dogs once a week. But we can look a little bit more closely at what that might be about. If you fast, then the herbs that you take in have a much stronger influence. And so that's one of the advantages of fasting. And one of the advantages of fasting your dog is that then when they go out to forage in the wilds, they have a better influence from the grasses and the chickweeds that they eat. One day, Annabeth was actually fasting, and she refused to eat her dinner. And so I decided, being very connected to the dog, I decided that I would ask her what was going on, find out a little bit more about this fasting thing. So I grabbed her by the collar and by the back of the ears, and I checked for ticks, and there were no ticks, which was a good sign. And I took her muzzle and I stuck it up next to my face, and her rubbery lips pulled up against my cheek, and I could feel her fang against my cheek. And I said, Annabeth, what is it? Why are you fasting today? Tell me more about this. I want to learn. And she said, well, I went behind the rosemary plant, and I found a place where a crow had hopped twice. And so I peed there. And then I found a place where 3 days before a skunk had walked across. And so to fix that, I pooped there. And then I came around the other side of the rosemary plant, and I found the compost pile, and someone had left a meat monster sandwich right on top of the compost pile, so I ate it. And that's why I'm not hungry. I always say life is short if you eat dessert first. So I encourage people to eat certain things in their diet. These are very easily grown herbs and vegetables that will extend your life, but they need to be taken on an ongoing basis. It's not like beginning herbalists are all like waving around their little tincture dropper waiting for somebody to have a cold. Or they've mixed up a sitz bath blend of herbs, and they're like, has anybody here popped a hemorrhoid recently? No, it's not like that. You're not waiting around to use your herbal knowledge. you're incorporating it into your daily practices of living and eating and resting and working. So some of the most important things that I can think of are the carminative spices, the standard carminative spices of the garden. Thyme, rosemary, summer savory. These herbs, if you use them on an ongoing basis in your food, will create this carminative antioxidant activity that will help you live longer, and it will counteract any negative effects that might occur from your diet, because they're free radical scavengers. They're going to keep cleansing you as you eat. So grow summer savory, harvest the summer savory just before it flowers, hang bunches of it up in the rafters to dry, rub it out, put it in a little bottle next to your stove, and sprinkle that on your food right before you finish cooking your food, so that you don't volatilize all the oils by all the volatile oils, all these antioxidant, aromatic, volatile oils should be taken in by your body, not volatilized in long cooking. So you add them late in your cooking, or you add them right to your food right before you eat. And this is a single practice that's going to extend your life. Another thing that I really recommend is to grow and eat hot peppers. Capsaicin, it's been shown, is extremely healthy for you and will prevent cardiovascular disease and stroke. So hot peppers should go into your diet on a daily basis. Another thing is the insoluble mucilage. Insoluble mucilage is very, very important as a prebiotic that feeds the probiotic bacteria that's in your gut. If you feed that bacteria with prebiotic substances like mucilaginous herbs like comfrey and marshmallow and chia, these things are very, very good for you and should be part of a daily diet, especially the marshmallow and the chia. Then also oats, but make the oat decoction. When you make oatmeal, it's not as good because you're cooking those prebiotic fibers and they're breaking down into sugars. So if you make the oat decoction, then what you do is you pick your milky oats during the summer, right? Dry the milky oats, and then you use a handful of milky oats in a pint of water, in a pint jar, pour on hot water, cover, allow to steep overnight. In the morning, pour off through a strainer and drink. This is an extremely easy practice for improving your gut health. And when you improve your gut health, you improve your immunity. And so what I always say is, don't fight the pathogen, bolster the immunity. My last quote is from Michael Moore, who left us in 2009, a famous herbalist of the American Southwest. And he said, "Let's stop at Arby's and see if there's any cheesecake." Well, Michael helped us out a lot by teaching us a great deal about the herbs. And I used to go down to the Southwest School of Botanical Medicine and do some lecturing there, and I always got a chance to sit in on his lectures, and he would sit in front of the class. Everyone is at these ancient school desks, and he'd put his hands across his generous belly, and he would talk about the influence of the herbs of the Southwest for human health. And when he died in 2009, I was back up here in Williams, and I was really sad. So I thought, well, what am I going to do to like help his spirit along? Are people praying enough for Michael? He took such good care of us, and I wish he'd taken better care of himself. So I thought, well, I'm going to make a mega smudge. So I got some white sage and some brittle bush and some ocotillo and myrrh resin, and I gathered them all together, and some Palo Santo. I thought, I'm going to burn this all, and then I thought, well, where am I going to burn it? Well, maybe I should get out my little barbecue, which is this rusty little flat thing that I put coals in, and I make a barbecue, always with garlic. So I dug around in the shed looking for the hibachi, the barbecue, and eventually I found it, and I pulled it out from underneath some various desiderata junk, and I was really shocked because there was this giant toad right in the middle of the barbecue, right down in among the coals and the obviously burned out coals, charcoal, and the ashes. And I'd never seen a toad in Southern Oregon before. They're not real common here. No, I didn't lick it. And I've never seen one since. But I looked at this toad, and it looked up at me, unmoving, except for the eye had sort of a covering that moved back and forth, an opaque, semi-opaque covering that moved back and forth over these bulbous eyes. I examined it, and then I said, "Michael?" And the toad sort of looked up at me. And so I grabbed the hibachi, and I moved it out into the sunshine, and I picked up the toad with both hands, and it didn't struggle, and I put it down in the herbs, and it hopped off through the herbs, one hop after another after another. And I said, "Bye-bye, Michael."